after the U.S. made military strikes and the detention with force of the country's president. An emergency meeting of the UN Security Council was held at the UN headquarters on Monday. The president of the UN General Assembly called for respect for the UN Charter and the international law. Countries including China and Russia have voiced a strong condemnation at the meeting against the U.S. action. Over the past few days, other countries also spoke out. Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Mexico, Spain, and Uruguay issued a joint statement expressing deep concern and rejection of the U.S. military actions. Demonstrations have also been held in many major cities in the U.S. against the administration's military actions against Venezuela. To dig deeper into the legal implications of the U.S. actions toward a sovereign country and its leader, we've been reaching out to U.S. legal experts over the past 48 hours. However, few agreed to talk on the record. But here is a brief excerpt of an interview I had with Professor Jeremy Paul from the School of Law at Northeastern University, followed by parts of an interview with Jeffrey Sachs I had hours after the U.S. attacks against Venezuela. Now, as we speak, the UN is conducting a special meeting regarding the latest, what Venezuela called military invasion of the country by the United States, and many consider as forcibly detaining the Venezuelan president in the United States. Now, tell us more about how do you see the international community can react through the UN process?
Well, the alternatives for the international community are varied. There are many economic sanctions could be imposed by other countries. The General Assembly could pass a resolution censuring the United States. The Security Council, which is meeting now, as you know, the United States has a veto within the Security Council, and therefore is unlikely to pass any actions that would be critical of the United States. The debate that will take place there will be one where the critics of the United States action will focus on the sovereignty of Venezuela.
In Chapter 2 and Chapter 4 of the UN Charter, it is a nation state, it's a member country of the United Nations, and both the United States and Venezuela are members of the United Nations, and they should abide by the same principles of the UN Charter. Otherwise, they can just quit. For example, the U.S., if saying, I'm not part of the UN anymore, then it does not have to abide by the UN Charter. But the United States is a founding member of the United Nations.
Founding member and host country. I would hate to see us abandon the United Nations. I think it'd be terrible for the world.
How precious do you think is the UN Charter to all of us, regardless of our national border? And as a result of that, what can we do together?
I think the United Nations Charter is very precious. And I would encourage every country around the world to do what we can to strengthen it and make it fairer. And what we can do is, I'm proud that the United Nations is located in our country. I'm proud of the contributions we've made to developing the United Nations. And I take the gist of your question to be, would it be tragic if the United Nations were to fall apart? And yes, it would be tragic.
Damage already done, isn't it? That there's already military actions toward Venezuela onto the territory of Venezuela, and also taken into detention with force of his president and the first lady of that country. Having said that, though, the U.S. Congress, if not taking action or strong opposition or declare it illegal, the latest actions by the administration, what does that mean to the credibility of the U.S. Congress?
Credibility is a strange word. I think that if the Congress doesn't do anything, then that will continue a pattern that we have seen in our country over the last several years, where the political party of the Congress tends to go along pretty easily with what it is that the president wants to do. And so it will send a message within our country that foreign policy will be more under the control of the president than it might have been before.
Rule of law has been a phrase used often by the United States, whether politically, economically, in academic world, and the list goes on. But many wonder, how does the latest event really reflect the lack of the rule of law or the ignorance of the rule of law by Washington or by the administration?
The debate about the rule of law in the United States is hot, heated, vibrant, and you can't judge the rule of law by any one action. But certainly the president's critics will see this as yet another example of the president putting his own policy preferences over and above the law. That's what his critics will say. And his supporters will say that the value of stopping drugs from pouring into our country is more important, and the president's legal arguments are strong enough so that they're willing to support him. And the country will be relatively split down the middle along those lines.
If rule of law can be only explained by the politics or massaged by politics, what does that mean to the credibility of the rule of law, so to speak?
I think there are some people who would take the position that if politics and policy preferences can trump the law, then you don't have law anymore. You have nothing but politics. But I think other people would say that that sort of rigid understanding of the rule of law doesn't understand how law really works. And to use a phrase that we use in the United States often, they would say there has to be play in the joints. And the law has to set guidelines, but they're guidelines and guardrails, but they're not absolutes. And you can have both the rule of law and flexibility at the same time.
Professor Schwartz, good to see you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. It's my pleasure.
Your immediate response about the military attack by the U.S. against Venezuela.
What's going on in the U.S. now, I call it gangsternomics. That is, it's not Trumponomics, it's really criminal actions where there is a weaponization of every aspect of policy, of public policy, economic policy, or national security strategy. As we can read from the recently published document on the U.S. national security strategy, it's very clearly publicly affirmed that the objective, the main goal of the new Trump administration economic policy is about economics, but not negotiating, but weaponizing economics and putting the American interests beyond any attempt to create a public sphere, an international public sphere. So when you go against governance, against global governance, and you actually implement criminal actions, that's like a behavior of a gangster or a gang group that's really against public sphere, against negotiations. And it's the reason why I've been calling this gangsternomics. Trump was very clear when he said, everything is a deal. Life is a big deal. So there's nothing beyond money involved in what we call gangsternomics. It's not about public sphere or governance. It's about making gains and getting whatever he can from whatever so-called partner he faces.
The U.S. side is suggesting that the big oil companies going to go in and also what they call repairing the infrastructure and certainly profit from the oil business over there in Venezuela. Meanwhile, the U.S. president also suggested that the U.S. side would assemble a team to manage Venezuela. Your response to these 2 points. One is about Venezuela is well known for its oil reserve, as a big oil producer, even though it has been reduced as a result of sanctions by the United States over the past few years. Your response to the U.S. suggestion about having its oil companies going into Venezuela and profiting from the business there?
If we watch the evolution of oil prices over the last 2 decades, we can see that oil prices basically reflect the mood, the cycles of global activity. So in terms of making a profit out of it, of course, it's a key objective, is one of the goals also stressed by Trump in this national security strategy. It's very clear that he wants to put American interests, especially with respect to raw materials, energy, access to rare earths. So it's clearly not only based on oil companies, but it's a major plan, a major strategy to put America first. He uses that expression again and again, America first. But as we have seen over this first year of the Trump administration, it could backfire. It looks like, it sounds like something that will bring lots of profits to US companies, but maybe the outcome is not that clear. Maybe it will not be that profitable at all. First of all, there are security reasons. Yeah. Of course, he wants to invade and occupy and bring these companies to make profit. But of course, it's not a small country, and there will be resistance. So even if you talk to business people, when they talk about investing in a country, it's not just a matter of invading and creating occupying forces that will guarantee profits. There will be resistance. We can see that this is a security issue that is not solved. There will be, and we have already seen this over this first day, we have seen all the reactions, the international reactions, diplomatic reactions.
So we understand the Brazilian government has already recognized the vice president of Venezuela as the governing person of Venezuela for now. Tell us more about that.
What we see in Brazil first is a long-term experience with US invasions or support to coup d'etat in Brazil. This is a long history. We cannot repeat it all over again, but there was an armada, of course, close to the Brazilian shore during the military coup in 1964. The Brazilian diplomacy has managed to keep, I would say, a third world position, I wouldn't say not neutral, but a very skilled and also strategic ambition to become a regional leader. So it's not in the interest of Brazil to openly support the US. This has changed. And President Lula, in particular, has been very successful in that matter, diversifying our trade partners and also acting globally as a leader. So I think that Brazil, now everyone is looking at Brazil because Latin America, the recent cycle of elections in Latin America have moved to the right. Many countries are going to the right. Argentina, Milei, everyone knows, he's been cheering Trump's invasion. So Brazil remains, along with Mexico, is a very special case because it's bordering the US. Brazil remains now as mainly the only possible resistance in terms of governance, in terms of making an appeal to the United Nations, making an appeal to public policies. Brazil, I think, remains now the key player in the region, and we must follow very, very carefully what President Lula and his team will do in the following days and weeks.
President Lula, according to media reports, already posted on social media talking about the bombing of a Venezuela country and also attempted arrest of the president, what he called unacceptable line. These actions, according to him, not only severely violates the Venezuela sovereignty, but also set an extreme dangerous precedence for the entire international community. And Brazil condemns these actions and is ready to promote dialogue and cooperation. Now, how do you see Brazil will likely to implement these promises?
We saw last year, for instance, Lula negotiating with Trump the issue of tariffs, trade tariffs, and he came out quite successfully. There is also negotiating power in terms of Brazilian resilience to Trump's tariffs. If Brazil becomes isolated as one of the only center-to-left political actors in the region, we must remember that if it wasn't for, Trump being just a candidate and Biden the president, the Bolsonaro coup would certainly have been successful. So there is a political element here. And of course, we are aware that now there's been a big change. If you are a country with important reserves of oil, energy, environmental assets, you are threatened by the new U.S. National security strategy.
Meanwhile, we also understand during the press conference, the U.S. side talked about the possible threats against Cuba and Colombia. So your response to that?
It was a threatening confession, I would say, that invading Cuba is not out of their plans. I mean, it's a total domination of the Caribbean scenario. So I think that especially Mexico should be concerned, because Mexico has this border with the U.S. and now has all the Caribbean under, I would say, a threatening strategy of the U.S. Let's remember that Trump, one of his measures was to rename the Gulf of Mexico. So there is a clear strategy of, as Trump himself has affirmed, of resuming the Monroe Doctrine, or what they are calling the Trump corollary of the Monroe Doctrine. That means all of the Americas must be brought under the umbrella of U.S. security concerns or security strategies. So Central America, especially Cuba, I think, is under an immediate threat, because Cuba, of course, depended. And even another thing that was mentioned in the press conference, the bodyguards that were helping Maduro were from Cuba. So I think that this is clearly probably the next target will be to occupy Cuba.